I've been gaming since the 1980s, and I've never bought a Nintendo system. Ever. If you're new to this channel, consider subscribing. I like to talk about games, nostalgic games that come back to life, remakes, that type of stuff. So you like that, consider subscribing, with a special emphasis on the Shenmue series. But today, this is my confession video. This is where I come up to you guys and tell you I've never, ever bought a Nintendo system ever. And I have no interest to. First of all, let me apologize and say I'm sorry to all of you gaming fans that love Nintendo. I initially was a Sega kid. And to this day, I think that little definition of me actually has defined most of my gaming life up to this day. Now, let me start off with why that is, or why I think that is, and how it actually affects gamers to this day. This type of little problem. Now, I started gaming in the 1980s. First system that I had that I would play, which was my brother's, was the Commodore 64, which was awesome. First game that I ever remember playing was a game called Tooth Invaders, which was nothing like Space Invaders. It was literally like a bunch of teeth on screen, and then you're with a brush. This little guy just brushing teeth, and then cavities would come and like take away all the teeth. Yeah, that's what I was playing. Until my brother eventually got a Sega Master System, the 8-bit competitor to Nintendo, with a bunch of games for it. Of course, we had Rambo First Blood Part 2, we had the Ninja, we had Hang On and Safari Hunt, bunch of those games. And obviously the Hang On game was my introduction to Yu Suzuki and his brilliance, who he would eventually go on and pioneer games such as Virtua Fighter and the lovable Shenmue series. Now, playing video games and playing the Sega Master System, I never really thought that video games themselves would have generations and then progress and get better graphics. I just really thought it was a stalemate, and I loved playing the games that I had. Specifically, they were my brother's. But I knew a bunch of kids as I was growing up, like 9, 10 years old. They had Nintendo Entertainment Systems. And I was a fan. One cousin of mine had a Nintendo Entertainment System, and he introduced me to a game that he had just got called Metal Gear. And that was like the hottest thing going, and it was just a really nice thing to be able to play it. But one thing that irked me about his Nintendo, and eventually all the Nintendos that I saw my other friends would have, is that good luck when you put in that cartridge into that system. 80% of the time, the Nintendo was not running. It was just going to flash on the screen. And you know that meme where everyone's like blowing on their cartridges happened all the time back then. And that's true. It's not just a meme. It actually did happen. However, when you played the Sega Master System like I had, you never had that issue. Also, one of the things that I liked about the Sega Master System, at least the model that I had, is that when you would turn it on without a cartridge and you did you held a couple of buttons, I forget what they are now, you got to play a game that was already pre-built into the motherboard. You didn't even need a cartridge, and the Sega can turn on and you could play games without it. It had its own kind of dashboard interface. And it gave you instructions on what to do. Say, hey, like input a cartridge. That was not happening back then. And the fact that it did it, I loved it. The colors were amazing, although the sound was better on the Nintendo, and I'll admit that. Sega Master System had better graphics. It just did. It had more colors on screen, better graphics. But Nintendo had the better games, and I will not deny that. That's because they did the licensing deal. I almost actually traded my Sega Master System with about 20 games for a Nintendo Entertainment System with one of my friends. And he was ready to do the trade. He said that his Nintendo didn't have that whole glitch where it wouldn't turn on, and he tested it in front of me, and it actually didn't have a problem loading his game. So I was wondering, what trick was he doing? So he would try to trade it with me, but then his parents said absolutely not. And at that point, I remember just thinking to myself, what am I doing? Everyone's got a Nintendo. I wanted to be the outlier and stick with Sega. couple of years later, my uncle got a Sega Genesis and a Super Nintendo because he loved to play video games too. And I remember thinking, like, this Sega Genesis is incredible. I want a Sega Genesis. I'm a Sega fanboy because I wanted to steer clear from all of those Nintendo heads. It became like a sort of rebellion, right? It was a more mature console back then. Sega had an impressive marketing campaign, what Sega does with Nintendo don't. Everybody knows that up to this day. But they were more edgy. They were better at sports games, which I was not really into sports games, but I was into the marketing that said blast processing. And it was a thing because sports games did run better on the Sega Genesis. And the fact that I had this console that was like neck and neck with Super Nintendo was like, I already stamped my seal of approval on my side. In the Christmas of 1993, my parents got me not only a Sega Genesis, but a Sega CD. So I was coming up from Sega Master System, where everyone had a Genesis or a Super Nintendo, and I jumped straight up to the Sega CD. I was everyone's best friend at that point. They all wanted to come over and play the Sega CD. Although, as we all know, it did okay, but it wasn't enough to really say that the console was a success. But the games on Sega CD, I still have the games up until this day. A lot of those games. And I still play them on my TV because I was such a Sega fanboy. People had Super Nintendo and they were playing those games. And I will honestly say, I did not resist playing Super Nintendo. I would just visit other friends and play it in their house and do that. So I was familiar with franchises like Super Mario Brothers and Zelda, but never super hardcore into it. I'd say the biggest game that I got into that was Nintendo owned was Super Mario World. I love Super Mario World. I can basically get all the levels, finish everything, can 100% that game easily, and it doesn't take me long at all. And if I wanted to speed run, I could pretty much get to the end within minutes. So that was a game that I was good at. But when it came to the desire of buying a Super Nintendo, it just, no. I was Sega diehard. Now, Sega had its failures. Sega 32X, even I knew when it was announced, like, this is a wasted time. The Saturn's around the corner. And you need a Genesis. Doesn't make any sense. I had the Sega CD, so I already had an add-on, but I also noted that when I had the Sega CD, it wasn't as successful because you needed to pay so much money and the console couldn't work by itself without that other piece. Granted, the CDX was released around then, but it wasn't worth the money at that point. So 32X skipped it. Sega Saturn wanted it so badly as a Sega diehard. Cousin got the Sega Saturn and it looked amazing, and he would have 3D games playing, and I thought it looked better than anything I'd seen. Till one friend actually visited. We all, like a bunch of friends, just got together in one apartment, and he unveiled, like in a towel, his PlayStation with Tekken and Ridge Racer and popped it in, and that looked amazing too. But I was still like, I want the Sega Saturn. I want the Saturn. I'm Sega for life. A couple years past, 1998, I was still with Sega Genesis and Sega CD, but I got a job that would actually pay me finally because I was old enough to work. And I started studying up on the console industry because I wanted a console that was going to last. Nintendo 64 was already out at the time. I was not looking towards Nintendo. Sega Saturn, I paid attention, but then I found out that Saturn was a distant third. And I refused to get another system that was destined to fail from Sega. I had already had the Sega CD, and unfortunately, we know the fate of that. But PlayStation was doing pretty good. So I said, you know what? I've heard about this game called Resident Evil. I hear it's great. It's out for the Saturn, but it was out for the PlayStation as well. And I wanted a console that was doing well. So I decided to bite my tongue and get the PlayStation. And I did, and I don't regret it. I've got some killer games for the original PlayStation that I was able to purchase. My first actual purchase, 2 games, Resident Evil 2 and X-Men vs. Street Fighter, which was not a really decent port. The Saturn version was a much better port of that game. But it didn't come out in the US, so all I had was the PlayStation version, and I decided to just absorb that. But with Nintendo and its games still on cartridges, I was like, why would you go to Nintendo? Didn't make any sense. Fast forward, because you guys are like, okay, I'm getting the point. Sega for life, PlayStation because I needed a competitor. When Dreamcast came out and I heard all the hype around it, I was back in, baby, all the way in to Sega. And unfortunately, it didn't last long. Although, to this day, we still celebrate the release of the Dreamcast. It's one of those consoles that everyone loves. Unfortunately, its fate was sealed when it came to the ease of piracy, as well as the looming PlayStation 2. So, we got the PlayStation 2. I bought the PlayStation 2 because I wanted Metal Gear Solid 2. And that's why I did that. But I also wanted to actually, again, have consoles that would stand the test of time. And Nintendo, what were they releasing? They went from N64, which was a cartridge-based system, which to me didn't make any sense. I wanted massive amounts of storage. I wanted clear audio and video. You weren't going to get that on the N64. Resident Evil 2, although amazing, on the N64, it's amazing not because it's graphical impressiveness, because that was a pretty old game at that point. Resident Evil 2 was amazing just because of the feat of compression that they had to do with that game, which in my opinion is like, this is your fault, Nintendo, and expensive as it was developed for that, I'm sure. But then you had Nintendo's, what's their next feat? The Nintendo GameCube. A little cube with games that are small, and it just was like, what happened to the Nintendo that wanted to be graphically advanced compared to everyone else? No, we're just going to give you weird-ass controllers and games that are smaller. Now, the Nintendo GameCube did have pretty good graphics, actually, but unfortunately, the game size were small enough that you couldn't have really massive experiences on it. You had a few winners, but not too many. Resident Evil 4, for example, I'd say that's a winner on the GameCube, and the graphics there were much better than on the PS2, which is what I had. And I eventually got the Xbox as well, but no GameCube. But with that being said, it looked more like a toy. And I was not a diehard of Mario 64, for example. Like, I played it. I thought it was cool, but I didn't care much. And then all the games, Mario Sunshine that came out on GameCube, and then the Zelda games that came out, I just was not into it because I had already skipped the boat. I didn't want to play them, and I never got into them. And even in the 16-bit era, I was the guy that was saying Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Hyper Stone Heist is better than Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles in Time. And everyone says that Turtles in Time was the best beat-em-up. Now, as I play today, I will say that I prefer Turtles in Time, the arcade, then Hyperstone Heist, then Turtles in Time for Super Nintendo. Because although it had more levels and there was much more to do in the Super Nintendo Turtles in Time, the animations I didn't like. The animations in the arcade version were amazing. The animations on the Genesis felt crisp, felt the way that they should be and responsive. And the Super Nintendo, I'm sorry, I didn't like it. So, kill me, but it is what it is. Fast forward, after the GameCube, you had Nintendo releasing the Nintendo Wii. And the Wii was interesting, but graphically inferior. So if you wanted to play next-gen games at the time, you were with a 480p system with the Wii and its motion controllers, which was hugely successful, but it's not the type of gaming that I wanted to do as an adult at that point. And I got the PlayStation 3, and the PlayStation 3 had the Move controllers, which if I wanted those type of games, the Move controllers was actually more responsive than the Wii controller and more precise, although not as successful, let's be honest. Then you had the Wii U, which was interesting concept, having a big screen controller and then like the game, the system itself, though only through Wi-Fi. Great concept, still inferior. And after the Wii U, you had the Switch, Now, Switch is an incredible, I mean, it inspired a lot of console makers to make their systems kind of look like this and be okay with it, because portable gaming was a thing that Nintendo basically owned. Besides phones, Nintendo was really the only ones that could be as successful. Yes, I got the PSP. Yes, I got the PS Vita, because I was not getting anything Nintendo. But Nintendo had the DS, 3DS, Game Boy Color, Game Boy Advance. I mean, forget about it. They owned it. But I wasn't into Nintendo games. And I think it was all due to the marketing as well as the familiarity as I got older. And now here I am in 2025. I've got a PlayStation 5. And then, yes, I have PlayStation 4, PlayStation 3, PlayStation 2, PlayStation 1. I've had the Xbox. I've had the Xbox 360. Got the Xbox One. Didn't get the Xbox Series X. And I will say that besides the original Xbox, the others were just gifts. I didn't buy them, but I did at least buy an Xbox console. And I never, ever gave any money to a Nintendo product. But to end this video, I will say I didn't buy this. Someone gifted me a 3DS because I said, hey, you like video games. This 3DS has Mario Maker. I thanked them for it. It's not even charged. It has no power. I've never bought a Nintendo console. Never bought a game for this. Never bought anything for this. Kept it to this day. I guess you can say that I own it. I do, but I'm Sega for life, because Sega does what Nintendo don't. Sega! Is it petty? No. And it's not even purposeful. The reason it still exists is because I have not gotten into Nintendo franchises because of the original marketing spin, and now I really have no interest in great titles such as Smash Brothers, great titles such as anything Mario or Zelda related, right? Incredible titles, I'm sure. But I have no interest. Now, question for you guys. If I were to really play a Nintendo franchise, what would be something you guys would recommend? So that you know, I'm a Sonic the Hedgehog fan. I am a Shenmue fan, obviously. I'm a Metal Gear Solid fan. Love those games. And I'm a wrestling fan. And yes, I've played No Mercy for the Nintendo. But again, it wasn't worth me giving money for a console just to play that. I had the SmackDown series, which I kind of liked. So anyway, that's my rant. That's my little story, and why I will never, at least for now, well, I don't think I'll ever be a Nintendo kid or a Nintendo nerd, right? Sega and other consoles all the way. I'm a loyalist. If you love Nintendo and you can't believe it, hit me with that speech on the comments down below as why I don't know what I'm talking about. Would love to hear it. Please bring it on. As long as you like and subscribe, and keep hitting those comments, because they do help this channel and I want to grow. Thank you. And then if I am to play one, maybe I'll play what you recommend in the live stream. But I still not playing the consoles. Not buying it. Anyway, I don't know. You can make my debut, subscribe to Davis Magnus, and I'm out. See you guys next time.